1 week ago, we took a close look at what we call the old-time religion. And we made the discovery that often the longing for a return to the old-time religion is only a desire to go back to what may be a more comfortable, a more familiar way of doing the work of ministry or the work of the church. However, we also discovered that kind of old-time religion is not old enough. Now, there are those who confuse methodology with theology. They believe that the way they've always done things is sacred and unchangeable, yet you and I know that in a fast-changing world, there is this requirement of a multiplicity of approaches if we're to be successful in reaching that world. And while our theology remains biblical and resolute, our methodology has to be as adjustable as it is relevant. And I might say that over the course of the last year, we have seen numerous adjustments to ministry and things that we've done that I think have actually ended up in many ways for the better. And that ministry in the last year sort of been like coaching a football game, and you have to make your adjustments on the fly. That's sort of how quickly these things can come around. Well, we underscored 4 elements last week in a return to an old enough old-time religion. First, we learned that an old enough old-time religion is willing to sacrifice meaningful relationships. Country, friends, family are secondary to loyalty and allegiance to God's will and God's plan. Abram forsook familiar faces and familiar places to follow the calling of God on his life. Second, we learned that an old enough old-time religion believes God for the impossible. An old enough old-time religion believes that God can use you to make a genuine difference in the world in which you live. God can and will utilize your life in a marvelous and wonderful way. He will bless you. We are to expect it. He will make you a blessing. We are to expect it. He will use you to impact the life of others. We are to expect it. Never think that it's impossible for God to work powerfully through your life. Abram accepted the incredible promises made by God that he would be a blessing to the world. Third, we discovered 1 week ago that an old enough old-time religion is willing to walk by faith. An old enough old-time religion does not require a beginning to end itinerary or a detailed approval sheet before surrendering to follow the Lord in whatever He's calling you to do. Abram began his journey without knowing where it would take him. God said, go that way, and I'll tell you when to stop. The fourth characteristic that we gleaned about an old enough old-time religion is this. An old enough old-time religion acts immediately. Abram did not dawdle. Abram did not procrastinate. Abram did not wait for a more convenient time. God spoke, and Abram obeyed at once. Now, last week, I told you that Genesis 12 reveals no fewer than 8 elements of an old enough old-time religion. So let's complete that picture tonight with the second 4. So this would actually be number 5 if you were taking notes. An old enough old-time religion will accept change and challenge even in the years of what we might refer to as chronological advancement. There is this terrible misconception in our culture that senior adults lose their usefulness and can occupy no effective place of service. Well, nothing could be farther from the heart of eternal truth. Some great Christian warriors have been pushed aside because of Satan's deception that Old is awful. Now I want you to look at the last half of verse 4. Notice, Abram was how old? 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abraham was 8 years older than I when God called him. Abram had already reached 3/4 of a century when God put before him a great and exciting task. Now, some may think of 75 as 1 foot in the grave, but Abram was just getting started. Just getting started. Moses reached 80 years young when God called him to lead Israel out of Egypt, a task that demanded strength, a task that demanded stamina. All the excuses that Moses offered to God, and there were many, as to why he just couldn't accept that challenge and couldn't accept that change, age never entered the discussion. He was 80 years of age, and yet he never said, "I'm just too old." Years ago, one of the feature stories in the Baptist Program magazine told of a preacher by the name of James Kennedy, C-A-N-A-D-Y. After passing the age of 60, James resigned as the pastor of a church in Johnson City, Tennessee. Then he and his wife Ellen went to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, the heart of Muslim country, to work in a Christian church established by Southern Baptist missionaries. The Kennedys ministered in Jeddah 5 years before the Saudis finally threw them out. They then returned to the United States with this empty feeling that it was too late to start any new work. However, God was not yet through with the Kennedys. As the Kennedys approached 70 years of age, they went to work in a Southern Baptist mission on the Ivory Coast in West Africa. James became the pastor, and Ellen, his wife, led the music. The Kennedys began doing volunteer missions, just as any one of us here tonight could do. And you may say, well, hey, I just can't preach. Well, it doesn't matter. James Kennedy said, you never know how the Lord can use you. Even if it seems crazy, do it if God calls. Genuine joy is knowing and following the will of God for your life right into those autumn years. Now, while it's true that physical limitations may dictate in certain areas, but age is never to be an excuse to refuse a change or a challenge. May it never be said that any one of us in here have become so set in our ways that we could never accept a change, that we could never accept a challenge. Abraham, 75. Moses, 80. The Kennedys in their 60s and 70s, when they started over twice, they started over. An old-time religion will accept change and challenge even in the latter years. Now, verse 5 offers us yet another element in an old-time religion. Check it out. Let's read verse 5. Abram took his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot and all their possessions which they had accumulated, and the people which they had acquired in Haran. Now, that's sort of an interesting statement, isn't it? We're not going to tear that one apart tonight. But the people they acquired in the land of Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they came to the land of Canaan. Now, what does that tell us? Well, I think it tells us that an old-time religion leaves nothing behind. When Abram set his mind to obey the Lord, he burned his bridges behind him, so to speak. He left nothing that would lure him back to Haran. Oh, he still had family there. He still had friends there. But when he left, he took himself along. Now, it wasn't that Abram forgot about the people there. It wasn't that Abram erased them from his memory. I think we are to understand here that Abram's heart no longer resided in Haran. Rather,